Hi, everyone. I am Amber Masso, the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement for the Terry Foundation. We're so glad that you could join us today. I'm here with Dr. Annella Stanford, one of our Terry alumni. I'll let her give a quick introduction of herself.
Thank you. I am Dr. Annella Stanford. I was a 2006 Texas A&M Terry Scholar. I am currently a veterinarian in Texas. I recently started my own business working as a relief veterinarian, primarily on the east side of Texas. What relief means is I fill in shifts where doctors are needed, and my priority right now is emergency and general practice in the small animal kind of sector.
It's great. Well, so glad to be visiting with you today. Our chat is going to cover quite a few things, but what would you say are two main takeaways you hope people will get from our conversation?
Yeah, my two takeaways would be one, to give yourself permission to change your mind, and two, to be brave enough to determine your own needs and go after what's best for you. So, this goes across all career paths and every walk of life.
So true. Well, I can't wait for people to be able to watch our conversation and glean some of those takeaways for themselves. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
So when you were kind of like on this journey to vet school, I know one of the big things that people have to decide at some point, right, is are you working with small animals or large animals or like a mixed practice, I guess. So what did that look like for you? I mean, did you only want to go a certain path, or did you kind of discover along the way that you wanted something different? I mean, I've just always been curious about that. I had a roommate in college who was a first and second year of her vet school is when I lived with her, and she made this huge transition between what she thought was only going to be an interest in small animals over to large animal, and I couldn't even fathom how much extra learning that would involve because she had no experience at all with large animals and just
hmm
learned to
I
love it.
know I know so many people that were in vet school that are even after graduation changed their mind already, which is a huge part of my story and platform is giving yourself permission to change your mind. That was a huge shift for me and really challenging because I felt like I was letting people down, but I wasn't letting myself down, which is the really big key. So I planned on being a mixed animal vet, moving to a small town, opening a clinic where if it can walk in the door or walk in the barn, I treat it.
Mm.
Uh, so I interviewed for vet school, wanting to work with cattle. I went through vet school in the large animal or mixed animal track, as they call it. There's even a new food animal production track that just started the year I was there. So I was one of the first in the class that actually, or in the school that actually did the food animal track. Out of 8 students, there were 2 women, including myself. So when I got to my 4th year of school, that 4th year is when you track which one you track. So the decision of what you're going to do really is not needed to be made. I think when you're going into veterinary school, it's important to commit to one or the other as far as on paper and also what you're studying. All veterinarians have to take both small and large animal coursework. You're not allowed to even select your own coursework your first 2 years of vet school. It
Mm.
is set for you. So your 3rd year, you start to select electives, and 4th year, you actually have to pick a track: small animal, large animal, mixed. Now there's also food animal. There's also exotics and alternative tracks where you have to work with advisors to make your own. And there is still a core set of classes. I would say, I think it was about 2/3 of the curriculum are still set. Every student takes large animal rotations and small animal rotations. So when you graduate, you are licensed to treat everything. That is the goal, and that's what Texas A&M's curriculum is based on. So when you graduate, you are also, when you go to veterinary school, just like any professional track, from my experience and from what I was taught, I think this is the best advice I ever got. You are not learning absolutely everything that you will ever need to know to be a successful veterinarian for the next 30 years of your life. You are
Mm.
learning how to learn. You are learning how to look up treatments for a patient and use your education to treat them appropriately. You are learning morals and ethics of treating animals. You are learning what our duty is. We have a veterinarian oath, do no harm, prevent suffering, all of that. You are not learning absolutely everything. So anyone that comes out of veterinary school and was tracking one thing and then a few years later decides to change, they are just as, they may not have had practical experience yet, but they absolutely can change. And I think a lot of people think that they're locked into that. Even veterinarians too think that they're locked into one or the other. I had no emergency experience outside of my 4th year of veterinary school. And this year, that was one of the big changes I made because I wanted to do emergency medicine. I just happened to not practice it for the first 3 years after graduation. And now I am. And I think having that mentality that I had learned how to learn, and there is no reason that I can't do it. If I had done it right out of vet school, I would have had just as much experience as I had starting this year, which was very little, but I had the education. We did learn a lot of emergency stuff. We had so many things that we had to study and learn that I hadn't used in a few years. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yeah.
but kind of a roundabout way of saying that you don't have to make, no decision is final, I guess I would say. No decision is final.
That is such an important lesson, I think, for people to be able to carry, especially people that tend to have like a very achievement centered mindset.
Oh, yes.
Like you have, like you said, you have to learn how to learn and allow yourself the ability to say, I'm still in the process of learning, but here's all the tools I'm accumulating along the way. That's so important.
Yeah.
And that's why anybody in any field usually has to do continuing education in some shape or form. They're not expecting you to have all the tools in your toolbox.
You can't learn everything in 4 years. The first year orientation of vet school, they tell you you're going to be drinking from a fire hose. And I always thought that analogy was frightening, and it is so absolutely true. It is so much information. You can't learn everything, even in those 4 years. So whatever you decide to pursue after vet school, you're going to be learning new things. And if you decide to change what direction you're going, you're going to learn new things. And that is, to me, the beauty of it, not a hindrance of it at all. So I've had definitely classmates that have mentioned to me there, I think it's all fear-based, oh, I don't know if I could do emergency. And I'm like, you passed the same state and national boards I did. You absolutely can. You could have done it right out of 4th year when you graduated, and I just didn't, and you didn't, and you can if you want to. You do have to find the right mentors. You do have to do continuing education. You do a lot of self-study, but that's what we went to one of the best universities in the world for, is to learn how to learn.
Right. And to, I think, learn how to be part of the network from one of those, great institutions as well.
I reach out to so many colleagues, some my class year, some my mentors from school, people I've met along the way, and just keeping connections. It's a very small knit community that, and for the most part, veterinarians want to help each other. So it's it stops being a competition once you're in vet school. They really want us to accept that. Once you're in vet school, when you're in that undergrad career and you need to get a 4.0, you need to get the highest GRE score you can to get in. You're in competition with 800 other people for 130 spots. And then once you're in, though, they tell you, you know what, you're going to all be called when you graduate. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a veterinarian. We have 130 degrees for 130 people. You are no longer competing. You are now colleagues. And it's a huge mindset shift.
Wow. So I'm curious about the lessons you've kind of learned along the way, even just getting to the stage where you become part of that cohort, because I know that wasn't exactly like a direct path for you either.
So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science with a minor in business through the business school. So I worked during undergrad. I did 2 different jobs that maybe we'll get to later. They definitely taught me a lot, but I was a server at the Olive Garden in College Station. And I was also a Mary Kay consultant before it was cool to have all these businesses now make me laugh. That was circa 2008. And I've been doing those kinds of sales things, or those business tips really have helped me now, even as a veterinarian. So I did 5 years for undergrad. So I did a victory lap. I had to finish my a couple of prerequisites for vet school. I had to finish I wanted to finish my minor, and that also helped boost my GPA because freshman, they do give you a little break there in the vet school application if your freshman year is not as great. I did get a C in my freshman year. So I did 5 years of undergrad. So I technically graduated 2011, even though my ring is class of 10. So I then I didn't intentionally, but I had 2 years off to wait to get into vet school. So those 2 years, 1 year, I guess that's where where we're going to get to the hierarchy of needs. My needs that first year were to take a break from undergrad. I was already burned out and exhausted. It's exhausting for anyone that's in the track of any professional degree. It's exhausting. So I took a little bit of a break. I was working to pay off one small loan I took during that 5th year. And I was also spending time with an elderly family member. So that first year I worked at Olive Garden. I moved to the Dallas area and I worked at an Olive Garden at night and on weekends. And I did work 40 hours a week. And during the day I spent time with my aunt. So I had prioritized already what the needs were. I did apply for jobs at vet clinics at the time because I wanted to work in vet clinics, but they just they were paying minimum wage. I couldn't afford to live on that. So I ended up not working at a vet clinic, which is not always what people tell you should do, but I think I gained more experience working in other industries. The second year I worked at a mortgage company of all things. I was a loan counselor on the phone, which is a fancy way of saying I was a debt collector, but for mortgages. I worked in an office setting and cubicle life, very similar to the office, but on a large scale. Just a very cool experience in and of itself. I got a lot more customer service experience there, corporate experience, working a job, financial experience, talking about mortgages and understanding. So very unique, I would say, experience for veterinarian, which is all part of my story now and has been so good for me. So that while I was at the mortgage company, I finally was accepted into veterinary school after my second year of applying.
I think those office jobs, and especially jobs in the hospitality industry, like if that is one of the streams of income that you have for yourself, never discount it just for anybody in general. I did the same thing. I waited tables during college and afterwards, and you have to learn how to talk to people and you have to learn how to read people in order to get good service. And those communication skills and overall customer service skills, you can't escape needing those no matter what industry you go into. So I think that it's more along how you can talk about the skills that those different jobs have given you, not just justifying why you weren't, in scrubs in a clinic during those 2 years between undergrad and vet school. So yeah. I think that especially the hospitality jobs is just, that'll be one of those things that I take a pretty hard line on, because people have to learn how to work with people. There's very few industries that you don't need those skills. And I mean, it's not like you just work with the animals. So I totally feel you on the server thing there. I worked at Madden's when I was in College Station.
Yeah. I do think that if I could, other than some financial literacy in high school, I think working a restaurant and having to live off your wages is always a great life experience for anybody. I think it really teaches you a lot. Teamwork, that's probably the biggest team working job I've ever worked. If you don't help your section partner or the entire team run food, get drinks, refills, you really learn not to work just for yourself. And I've really, even all the other jobs I've worked, still don't think I've worked as much teamwork as that situation. And it was also the funnest times of my life. I'm still good friends with a lot of people from the restaurant world. I know some of them are now real estate agents and restaurant managers, and we just all have these really cool stories. And we all started in one little restaurant.
Yeah, I think the multitasking is the other thing. That's prioritization, multitasking, really deciding at like the drop of a hat what needs to happen first, and then 3 or 4 steps ahead of yourself. So
that has helped me so much as a veterinarian. The last 3 years I worked in a really busy corporate vet clinic. So we would see 18 to 25 patients in a day, and if you do the math, that's not a lot of minutes per pet. And people that I worked under, my chief of staff that was training me, was very impressed with my time management skills. And I was like, this is like waiting tables. I got 3 rooms. This one's getting this one's getting Hartman tests. Like, no, this is easy. Just try getting sit with like 3 10 tops on a Saturday night. Like, this is nothing.
Mhm.
So yes, time management, multitasking. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely never like for anybody like watching this chat, just never discount the
Mhm.
experience you have if it seems like it's outside of whatever that path is supposed to be or whatever that field you're supposed to work in. If anything, I think it probably makes you a more competitive person if you're able to more succinctly talk about the skills you gained that you wouldn't maybe have gotten just being a student, like shadowing in a clinic in the same way.
Yeah.
So,
And I will say, I did also shadow while I was in undergrad. I
mhm.
did do that. I worked for a little bit. There was one time I had 3 to 4 jobs at one time,
Uh-huh.
because I was working at a vet clinic, but that I only could do a couple days a week because of my school curriculum. So then I worked restaurants at night, and then I had a seasonal job at Santa's Wonderland with my goal toward. I did shadow. I shadowed at the large animal clinic at the vet school, at some local clinics around where I took my personal pet. So yeah.
So there's one thing that you'd mentioned earlier whenever we were kind of talking about your gap year, and that's looking at your personal hierarchy of needs and kind of setting priorities for yourself. So I'd love for us to be able to kind of like dig back into that a little
Yeah.
bit. Because you also mentioned the financial aspect of things.
Yeah.
So how has that looked for you over time in terms of deciding what you need versus what people told you maybe that you needed or that you were supposed to need? Because I think that's a challenge that so many people face, trying to kind of like separate those two when they're making those decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I'm coming back to those years because this has been it's been a decade. When I graduated undergrad, I'm like, what am I going to do with this gap year? The first one, I was told to go get a master's. For example, it's a very common thing to, well, go get a master's, get your grades up so you can go into vet school. They don't tell you that that's going to cost you an extra $30,000 to $40,000, even with grants. So I didn't do that. I was taught, I was in the offices even applying for some biomedical science master's programs, animal science master's programs. So that was one recommendation that wasn't going to work for me. I had nothing I was going to do with that master's degree. If I didn't get into vet school, I didn't feel like it was going to be the right call for me. So I did speak specifically with the vet school advisor of admissions, and she gave me a couple different options. That was one option, is go to continue to get a master's in something animal science or science related that would help boost the GPA, was one avenue to help you strengthen your application. I needed more experience hours, so I was going to shadow or work at a vet clinic. And the third was boost your GRE, which you're going to be studying for that no matter what. So getting a master's was not for me. The debt part was a big one. Why would it? That's a car. That's a really nice car. $30,000 to $40,000 to throw away just to get a couple of credit hours. It was only going to boost my overall GPA by a very small portion. So I think scrutinizing the advice you're getting and whether it fits for you is very important. That was not going to work for me. There was nothing I was going to do with that. It was going to be a waste of a master's degree. I do not think education is a waste. Financially, it was not going to be a smart decision for me. The other thing was working in vet clinics. So at the time, minimum wage was $7.25 an hour, I think, and I could not live on that. I was not helped by family at all. Moving back home wasn't an option to live with family. So getting even, and I still had roommates when I moved to the Dallas area. So being able to make ends meet, that wasn't going to happen. Also in the Dallas area, most of them wanted you to have a vet tech degree. So then I looked at becoming a licensed vet tech, and I even was turned down. That's a funny story. My not animal science, my anatomy professor in undergrad was starting the current Blinn vet tech program.
Mm.
So I talked to her. I was like, oh, should I do the vet tech program so I can, she actually told me, she straight up looked at me and was like, I will not approve you for the vet tech program because you need to be a veterinarian. And I'm like
Wow.
floored. Like I thought this would be, but it makes sense. You're not going to go, most people don't become a nurse before becoming an MD. It's just not a direct path. And I thought that was very interesting that she was like, no, because she asked me why, what was my why was I doing it? And ultimately she was like, no, your priority is to still become a veterinarian. So let's continue to focus on that. So very frustrating because I'm like looking at all these different avenues and this is approaching graduation time. I've got to leave College Station or stay there and live there. Where am I going? It was a very, very stressful time. So I think that was the first time I really was very strict about priorities. Like, well, this is why I'm doing this. And I had to tell a lot of people and defend my decision to a lot of people that were trying to tell me, you should do this, you should do that. And I'm like, for my unique situation, it's not going to work.
Mm.
So I financially wanted to find something that was going to work for me. I'd already been working at Olive Garden in College Station. I moved to the Dallas area, worked at Olive Garden there, met a whole new group of people, worked at a whole different management style and all of that, which was amazing. Actually, really loved it there and did that for a year and also decided to stay with my aunt. When I moved there for about 3 months, I was still applying to vet clinics, trying to get in. I did have a couple that I did some shadowing with instead of getting hired by them, but ultimately getting hired at a clinic to make pennies and not be able to pay my loan off that I had
Mm.
make ends meet and pay for my own living because I was paying everything, my car note, I didn't have a car note actually, my car was paid, my car insurance, my personal insurance is everything, cell phone bill, all of that. I was paying all of it. So that I think is probably frustrating for a lot of even a lot of people who have received the Terry Scholarship. Our college experience isn't the same as quote everyone else's. It's
Mm.
perception, but you see other people whose parents are paying for this and they bought them a new car and this and that, and you're like over here trying to hustle and get your degree. And I think that you can look at comparison two ways. Comparison is a thief of joy, or comparison can be a motivator. You can see where they're at and think, oh, I want to be there someday. I want to be able to pay for my kids to go to college so they don't have to struggle. But also look at the struggle that you go through now is the struggle that a lot of people won't go through until their late 20s or their early 30s. You're going to go through it early. You're going to already know how to budget. You're going to know how to work, how to hustle. And by the time you get to your mid to late 20s, you're already set financially as far as your mentality goes. So I see a lot of my classmates that graduated vet school with me that first time they've ever had to do a budget, first time they've ever just done a lot of things that I've already gone through. And so I feel like that in that setting, it really changed my perspective. I used to definitely fall into the victim mentality, like, oh, I'm being punished because I'm poor and I grew up in poverty and I don't have my family to even give me gas money to go visit them for the weekend. I just fell into that, like, oh, woe is me kind of mentality. And when I finally flipped and was able to see the benefits of everything that I struggled through, just changed my mindset completely. My sisters are currently in College Station at Texas A&M, and I've been telling them the same thing. Everything that you're going to go through is going to make you a better person if you decide to choose to look at it from that perspective instead of letting the comparison steal your own joy for what you're going through. Use the comparison to be motivated to be where you want to be. So maybe our generation of our family is not able to have college paid for, but hopefully our kids will, or just there's a different perspective there if you find it. I think I got off track.
No, not at all, really. I think it's important to remember that it might take a shift in perspective. I think it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, even just looking at the jobs, like between undergrad and vet school too. It's how you interpret that experience and how you look at that experience, and then also how you turn around and communicate that to others. That's so important. So yeah, I don't think that was off topic at all. But
I do have a comment on that note, actually, getting specifically for people applying for veterinary school. There is a distinction on your application between veterinary experience and animal experience. If you are hired to work at a vet clinic, you have to be careful because about 50% of your hours can be used for your veterinary specific experience. So when I got to digging deeper into that, working at a vet clinic was not going to be the only way to get vet experience. I could shadow during the day and get some hours there, and then go work a Olive Garden shift at night to make money. So a lot of people think like, well, I've been working for years at a vet clinic, but if 2 of those years were a kennel tech, you were cleaning kennels, which is a very important job.
Mhm.
It was animal experience, though, not veterinary specific experience, because you were not under direct supervision, direct learning with the veterinarian.
Wow.
So if any pre-vet students have any questions about that, I love breaking down the application, because that's what was done for me. The admissions advisor and I were like best friends, basically. I feel like she knew my name, she knew my face since I walked in the door. She's like, "What's up now, Annella? What do you want?" So I can help break down, but that was a huge fight. Like, why do you think it's important to go work at a vet clinic? Well, to get vet experience for my application. Okay, there
Mhm.
are alternative routes to that though. And
Right.
knowing that changed everything for me. When it came to like, well, I'm gonna have to work 2 jobs to work at a vet clinic, and only half my vet hours are going to count for experience,
Yeah.
or I can go shadow 4 hours a day and then go work another job. So really looking at the why of everything. I look at the why of everything. Why are you
Mhm.
doing this? So you can really break down the real reason you need this or don't.
Mm.
So just want to interject that since it came
Sure.
up.
No, I think that's really important for people to keep in mind too, being able to go in and understand and interpret whatever requirements they might be looking at. But I think also helping identify advocates for yourself. And of course, you need to be your own advocate most of the time for sure. But um, understanding where there is somebody who can help you, like that advisor, for example, or people who've gone through the process before, being able to take advantage of your network or at least tap into your personal network. That's another translatable skill too that I feel like a lot of people don't realize is something that you can really sell yourself on. But it's true. Like you, again, it's everything's a process of learning, and part of that involves understanding when you have the capacity to learn on your own and when you need to be able to identify who can help you
Yeah,
on that journey.
absolutely.
So yeah, it's all of that. I mean, all of that is just super important and doesn't only apply to people who are on the veterinary track for sure.
Anything. Yeah, like you don't need to go become a nurse to become an MD, which that one seems a little more innate for people, but same thing,
Mhm.
you don't and I think working as a vet tech is very important for other reasons. But when it comes to your application and you're managing your time that you have for those few months that you can improve your application,
Mhm.
the purpose of working at a vet clinic was to gain veterinary specific hours. And when it got down and dirty, that wasn't going to happen. If I was working as a vet tech, I needed to do a little of both. So,
Right. So okay, we talked about, like, I kind of took us back in time a little bit to that like gap experience you had.
mhm.
But one of the things you'd mentioned was having this plan of working at the mixed animal practice and all of the things that you wanted to do once you graduated from vet school. So what does that look like for you now? Like where are you right now, and how closely to that plan do you feel like you've stuck over the years?
Yes, yeah. So, uh, there are other pieces to fill in with that, so I'll fill those in. The reason I changed my mind was again another priority list. I had to make a list of my personal needs and be able to defend those needs. So, and by defend, I mean my family asking why I'm not doing this, or my advisors thinking that my advisors expect one thing, and being able to go to them and explain why I'm doing another. So I planned on uh, graduating, working in a mixed animal clinic. While I was in veterinary school, I did fall into, I think I was probably having this my entire life, just didn't really know it, but essentially depression and mental health issues caught up with me. There was a lot of trauma and things in my background before I went to college that probably won't get into today, but I had a lot of personal things happen. So my mother died. There was a lot of just other types of, there were other abuses that happened and trauma. So all of that caught up to me. That school was very, very hard. I had wonderful advisors that kept me from quitting, because I got close twice. I was in my advisor's office just crying, like, I don't think I should be. There were so many different reasons that I almost left. And I'm so glad I didn't. The closer I got to graduation, the more my priority list changed. And I was really scared of telling my advisors that I wasn't going to become a mixed animal vet straight out the gate. I wasn't going to be their poster child for a woman going out into the country and where, as much as I wanted to, really wanted to stand up for like that female empowerment in the industry. It's still very male dominated, working as a large animal or mixed animal veterinarian. And I know several classmates that are doing it that are women, and I adore them so much. I'm so happy that they are, and I hope to do that again myself soon. The priority when I first graduated was my mental health and also finances. Again, I didn't have any family really financially helping me at all since I've been 18. And vet school was very expensive. So I graduated around 165,000 in debt. And that's on the low end for a lot of people. The Terry Scholarship helped me so much because that was all of undergrad was covered. So that 165 was my my vet school experience plus paying my bills and everything. So I had a lot of debt. One of the leading factors of depression and suicide in the veterinary community is our finances. I wanted to change that for myself. I didn't want my need to pay my loans to control my choice of jobs. And I knew that, so mixed animal clinics, mixed animal vets out in the country are definitely paid less than their small animal colleagues in the big city. So I knew that it's already a hard job and a hard life working out in the country, being on call all the time, those hours. I knew mentally I wasn't in the place that I could do that at the time. Financially, I wasn't in the place to take a job that was going to pay really low. So my top 3 needs that first year were financial, trying to get the highest paying job I could with better hours for my mental health, which meant going into the city and working a small animal clinic job. And the third one was finding really good mentorship. I wanted to find doctors that agreed with having high quality medicine, keeping up with continuing education. And unfortunately, a lot of the clinics I was interviewing at, we didn't agree on certain things as far as quality of medicine. There were there's a huge generational gap and transition happening, especially out in the country with a lot of vets that they didn't keep up with certain restrictions and requirements. And there was a question of what quality medicine was I going to learn out there. And so I changed my direction. I did interview with, I don't even remember how many clinics I interviewed with, and almost all of them except the one I actually chose to work for were mixed animal. So I was trying to find the right fit, and I just wasn't finding it to meet all of those requirements. And so I'm religious and spiritual. It was a lot of praying, a lot of crying, a lot of praying some more, talking to people. I remember going kind of hat in hand to my 2 mentors who were like my vet school dads, both mixed animal vets for years, came to the university kind of in their retirement years to teach. And I almost felt like I was letting them down. And I told them what I was doing and why. And they were so gracious. They're like, you have thought about why you're doing this. And I told them like my plan was to set myself up for success and then go work out in the country in a few years. And they were very supportive of that because I had thought through it. But that was a really hard conversation. My family as well, they were like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you working? But they don't know the industry, and most of your family doesn't really know the industry of what you're going into. I didn't have any current veterinarians. I had a great uncle who was in his 90s when I was in vet school. Like there was no one actually doing what I had done with this kind of profession. So there was this visual of what I was going to do versus what the job actually was. And they don't know that. So you really have to be able to break it apart and know what's best for you. And ultimately make sure that you're doing what's right for you and not for other people. And my family is completely happy with what I'm doing now, and not that that was going to change anything, but they ultimately, if they love you and they want you to do what's best for you, they're going to understand. And but that was really hard, that and talking to my advisors.
It takes a lot of bravery, I think, to go for what you want, especially when it seems to be counter to what you were told you're supposed to want.
And I think even knowing what you want, that was the hardest part for me. Once I really did write down, like and generally had to just write from my anxiety. What was I so anxious about? The finances, good mentorship, letting people down. And I literally had to write it all out and see it on paper and then start pick through like, well, these are my priorities. My mental health was the number one priority, which meant I had to find a good job with good hours. I had to find a good mentor, a non-toxic work environment, which that happens in all industries. So
Right.
we're looking for a good place to work and having a higher paying job so that I could pay off my student loans and then be able to make changes to my career that were not related to money.
Mm. So you mentioned that business minor, and we've gotten a chance a little bit to talk about what you're currently up to now. But how does all of this relate to you deciding what you needed, deciding what you wanted, and then what life looks like for you now after you've kind of started going after some of those
Yes,
items on your list?
that is the fun, exciting, crazy adventure I'm currently on. So I graduated in May of 2017 and started full time work June of 2017. I didn't even give myself, I think I gave myself 4 weeks to move and get everything ready. So I worked at a small animal clinic in the Dallas area for the last, it was exactly 3 years. I didn't quit until July of this year. And we're talking today, this is October. So it's only been a few months. I was planning on making this transition for probably the whole year before. I just didn't know what the transition looked like. I knew I wasn't satisfied anymore. So that the list of needs started to shift. I was paying off my student loans. I should be debt free, fingers crossed, 2 months from the time we're doing this video. So December 31st, 2020 was my goal. I set that goal back in 2018. I set the goal when I graduated, but when I actually did the numbers, set the date that this was the date. So
So close.
year,
You're so close.
I am so close. I'm so excited. And my projection is I will definitely hit it. So by the skin of my teeth, slide into home base, but I will. So a year ago, or a year, I guess it was the summer of 2019, I was starting to burn out in my current clinic. I did have a healthy work environment for the most part, but there were certain things that were no longer good for me. I was not learning. So again, my goal was I had that mindset of being that mixed animal vet out in the country, and the mixed animal vet out in the country hospitalizes animals and has sick pets overnight and does all this crazy stuff along with vaccine appointments. And I was doing mostly preventive care and doing a couple of urgent care things and then sending them to the ER for overnight. I really loved emergency medicine during my last year, during my clinical year at veterinary school, which was a surprise. And so I was starting to feel a little unsatisfied. I felt like I essentially hit a glass ceiling of what my clinic was going to allow me to do, or what their clinic model was and what I wanted to do medically didn't match anymore. And that was really, really hard. I think I was very unique. Even when I finally put in my notice this summer, amid COVID and everything, I had like the two levels above my chief of staff call me and ask me what was going on. They were offering more money and all of these things. And I'm like, those were not the reasons I was leaving. I was leaving because I wanted to do more um, with my vet school knowledge. I was like, I'm not using half my knowledge. And I also knew that 3 years out of school, I had been advised by a couple of people, like, by the time you're at your 5th year, you're pretty much set. If you don't want to make a change, you're not going to. So I had that in my mind. Like, I was in a good place. I knew what my day was going to be like every day. I had good income. I had a pretty good place to work. But that was no longer satisfactory. Like, I didn't want to just coast anymore. That's not my personality. And I had these other goals. I still had in mind that I would like to go work out in the country. The reality with that is I might be the only doctor around that knows how to hospitalize a sick patient for multiple different things. And I wanted to learn that while I was in the city with a bunch of clinics around. So I was already thinking, I was dissatisfied. I didn't know what I was doing yet, though. I thought I might go work for someone else. I had my LinkedIn profile, and I was never on there, but I had a clinic owner of an emergency clinic reach out to me just serendipitously. I was already thinking about doing some emergency work, and he reached out to me to ask if I was looking for a full-time job, but I wasn't. I told him I would consider coming working a couple of shifts, and that led into, he was a good mentor. I was never alone. I was working and doing emergency shifts starting in January of 2020. So that really helped my confidence. I had a couple other mentors I was talking to at the time that did the same track. They had worked similar clinics like I did when I started, and then they transitioned to emergency and now they own their clinics. So for them, hearing them tell me that was a natural transition was also encouraging. Okay, I can do this. And so I love emergency medicine. I started interviewing at clinics. I was still trying to find a mix though. I didn't want to do full-time emergency. The hours are crazy. I
Mm.
was trying to have my cake and eat it too and find that sweet spot. I started interviewing around the time COVID started hitting, so that was challenging. And so there's a lot of FaceTime interviews and things. Didn't really find the right fit. I wanted a good work environment. I'm a little too strong-headed at this point to have anybody telling me what I'm going to be doing, which I think is important just as a doctor, being able to stand up for yourself and say you're not going to do certain things that you ethically don't agree with. So I just through that trial of interviewing, I had a lot of interviews, which I think is a great way to find what you do or don't want.
Mm.
And really like listening and interviewing both directions, which is an interview tip I would give. You always want to be interviewing the person who's interviewing you, because it's a two-way street. We are in such a good economical situation right now, at least in my field, where veterinarian clinic owners are really hurting for associates. So you really need to be interviewing them as well, and not just taking, it's a negotiation. It's like buying a house or buying a car.
Right.
Their first offer is not their best. You need to, and things, not just money is negotiable, your hours, there's a lot of other things. So, but long story short, I ended up doing none of those things. I ended up setting up my own company to basically work for myself. I'm an independent contractor, and now I work in the state of Texas anywhere I want. I do emergency small animal clinics right now. I'm probably going to branch into some mixed animal clinics too, because I wanted multiple opportunities. I wanted more experiences, and I had major clinic commitment issues. I didn't want to be tied down in one place. So that's what I'm doing now. I also had other interests. I'm starting to do some writing, and I'm going to be starting to do some blogging next year. But more importantly, I'm starting to speak out more about mental health in my field, certain specific things I'm passionate about. I'm thinking about starting a program teaching how to be an independent contractor as a veterinarian. We're called relief doctors. The human side, they call them locum doctors. There's a lot of terms. It's hard for me to know how to explain what I do.
Right.
But basically, I'm the vet. I have the license. You have a clinic. You need a vet for the day. I go work your clinic for the day. And so that's where, I fill in shifts if a doctor needs the day off, or the doctor's sick, or they just need extra hands because they've been really busy right now. So that's what I'm doing. So that's where the business minor came in. I already had an approximate knowledge of what I was supposed to do for that, and at least enough knowledge to know how to set it up. Actually, doing my Mary Kay business for so many years on the side taught me more about business than actually ever earned money. It
Right.
definitely paid me back in that. So I've been doing that since August 1st, 2020. I'm currently in Austin. I lived in the Dallas area. I'm currently in Austin this month to work clinics, but I was also over in the Tyler area and Houston already. So I travel a lot right now, which is the exhausting, crazy part, keeping my schedule organized. I'm traveling with a dog and a cat. So, that's fun, but I'm loving it right now. I'm getting the variety I wanted. I'm learning from so many different people, different veterinarians. I don't work alone most days. I'm with other doctors. So it's really helped me, I guess, learn a lot of new things and test my own perseverance a little bit.
Right. Well, I think too, just looking back at what your list of priorities was, and being able to decide where those things needed to rank next to each other or above or below each other, because you did say that your, financial stability was important. And if you were getting paid well, being able to decide, well, if some of my goals are, related to my finances and paying off my debt,
Mhm.
but there's also this huge part of the rest of my career that is just as, if not more important, that I need to pursue as well. And deciding how you can balance those, because it seems like you did. I mean, you're getting close to paying off that debt, and you've been able to sort of pursue this path that's going to let you continue learning, to get you to what that long-term goal is. So, um, having that entrepreneurial spirit, I think seems like it's benefiting you. And I know you're just at the beginning of it. But I think that's a very admirable step to take, considering all of the uncertainty that we've been seeing this year with, just all of the changes that are happening due to the pandemic. So,
and I think if I hadn't already been living really frugal, I didn't change my lifestyle from college to vet school to actually working, there wasn't a whole lot of changes. I should probably take care of myself a little bit better, but I still kept a lot of those college things, the frugality of it and all of that. So I don't need a whole lot financially, and most of my money has been going towards my student loans. And now I'm going to be transitioning towards savings and investments afterwards, including investing in my own business. Because if I want to open my own clinic soon, or even buying a house, getting a good down payment and all of that. If I wasn't already set to live a certain way and also so close to paying off my debt to where my income will be free to where I can do whatever I want, I could work a lot less and actually have time to pursue some of these creative interests and still have a great quality of life. So paying down my debt, this was the plan from the beginning. Paying off my debt, it wasn't just so I could be debt free for no reason, just to be. It was to free up my money, and there's a whole as a whole talk on its own.
Well, and I think it all of it kind of relates back to this intentional goal setting and this intentional self-appraisal, so that you can decide where do you need to shift things on that list of goals, how do you need to prioritize things, and knowing that that's a fluid living process and it's not something that's set in stone. So it's one of those things that I hope you're very proud of yourself for being able to stick with it, surely. But I think it's a great lesson just for people to learn overall, again, about intentionally giving a name to your goals and then constantly going back and reassessing them so that you have the tools that you need personally when it comes time to advocate for yourself, or even just to be brave enough to say, this is what's best for me and I need to start making things happen to move in that direction. So I think if people get anything out of our chat today, I hope it's that. It's just looking at what your hierarchy of needs is overall, and understanding that might shift over time, but using it as a tool for goal setting and for self advocacy. So it's so important.
Yeah. And I think if you're already listening to this, you've already received the Terry Scholarship, which is a huge step. And I think the next step, though, is remembering that you still have to know how to manage your money when you start making your own money. You don't have to pay for undergrad now, which is a huge blessing. You will not be successful if you don't go the next step towards understanding your own financial literacy and education, because most of us probably didn't get a lot of that. I know I didn't. I have devoured financial information since high school. And that was part of the reason I got a business minor. And I'm still, to this day, I'm still constantly thinking about learning how to take back. I don't know anything about investing. I'm about to start really diving into that. But just starting with knowing how to not live paycheck to paycheck anymore and be able to change your family tree to where hopefully, we're the ones setting up our own type of scholarship or giving back to the Terrys. If you think about Mr. Terry and Mrs. Terry and their story, that was always inspirational to me, knowing that he received a scholarship, and now years later he is giving thousands of other people scholarships. That was not an accident. He didn't get the money to do that by accident. He didn't accidentally fall into giving these scholarships. He's very intentional with his life. So I think we're honoring him by taking care of ourselves after we graduate and being able to help others too. And that starts with taking care of yourself and being responsible for your own everything, including your own financial literacy and your own finances.
Right. Well, and I think also just continuing to carry the responsibility of always learning. Like you said before, you're still learning now, whether it's got to do with your own business, your personal finances, or the principles of veterinary practice. So Well, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope anybody watching it was able to glean some great lessons from it. We had a brief conversation previously about you doing a financial literacy specific session, so I look forward to planning that with you and figuring out how we can get some some concrete tools and tips together for people
Yes.
who are wanting to prioritize that as well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, thanks so much for having a Terry and 30 chat. I look forward to getting people's feedback on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.